We'll call this special voting session to order on Tuesday, May 22nd, 2020 at 6:03 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Present.
Mr. Bateman?
Present.
Mr. Leith?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Present.
Mr. Parrott?
Present.
Mr. Downs?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Present.
Mr. Haneke?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there anyone on the line that would like to speak under public participation? Okay, we're going to move down then to new business and communications. Mr. Bateman, Mr. Welch, do one of you guys want to start?
So, working with the businesses downtown and the businesses out west, as we know, come Friday, retail businesses can open up with restrictions for inside their store, and bars and restaurants can open up for outdoor use only. So that does present a problem specifically for the businesses downtown that do not have a parking lot or a place to expand outside their business. So as discussed last week, we're trying to devise a plan to allow those businesses to do that during the month of June. Did a lot of measuring, walking off, met with Mr. Harneke and Mr. Welch downtown to discuss different things, talked to a couple business owners while we were down there, and a nice visitor from Chicago. And what I'm proposing is each business would receive 3 parking spots, and if they need more than that, they would have to reach out to the newly formed committee or an alderman to see that their additional space is warranted. That would also include, we'd probably have to talk to businesses adjacent to those and such. And then the city would provide a minimum of 100 feet of snow fence. This is so that the parking spots could be cordoned off for patrons. The putting that up would be the responsibility of the business. I do have a business that suggested they have their own fencing, and as long as they fence it off, I'm okay with that. And the use of city picnic tables, we would have to hold that at a maximum of 4. We only have 23 to be used. And then the rest would be whatever suggestions came out of the Liquor Commission. I seen an email to that today, but I would allow the mayor to speak on that because he's the liquor commissioner. And the rest of it is to follow, I guess, the governor's orders as best they can, or if there's any problems arise, reach out to the city and we'll make sure that we can try to accommodate any needs they have to try to maximize their ability to sell their products during this first month of phase 3.
Jim, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and speak to the council?
And I'm sure all the other businesses and trying to work something out. My only concern, and I kind of got the impression from an email today that we weren't going to make the roads one way. My concern is if we don't use the center thing, the center lane as going one way, we've got people sitting out in the parking spots, and then we've got traffic going right by those people. If something would happen or something, a driver gets distracted or a child would run out, I would like to have that buffer between the parking spot, that extra lane between the parking spot and the barricades, for the one-way, but whatever works, that's just my opinion, and maybe the chief has, could probably comment on that better than I could, but that's my thoughts.
Tracy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree. I've talked to a few businesses who have reached out to me, and I've reached out to a couple myself. And quite honestly, it is a mix. There are some that believe that the roads should not be even put in a one-way direction. My personal opinion is for those businesses that we have wider roads where it is possible to do it, that we make that portion of the square a roundabout per se, with the understanding that this is only temporary. We're not making a permanent change here to traffic. This is just temporary relief until those businesses can get their patrons back inside of their establishments. The map up on the screen is what Alderman Bateman drew as a proposal for one-way streets. He drew that, so I'll let him explain it in more detail.
So, as Mr. Welch said, it's a 50-50 mix of one-way and not one-way. The pros to the one-way, safety issues. The cons to one-way is, quite honestly, coming from over a decade of pigs and swigs. People drive down the road, and all of a sudden, we've had people plow right into the barricades, knocking them off their posts because they're just not paying attention. Now that's going to happen no matter what. So the way it's up there, if you see the section around the square that does not have a red line, that is McLean Street. That is, we cannot make that one way because you have the federal post office on one side and you have the county seat or the courthouse on the other. There is also no retail establishments on that street, no reason to make that one way. So as you can see, Pulaski Street would be one way for 2 blocks. That would encompass Mama's Arcade, the arcade, which houses Top Hat Creamery, Spirited Republic, and other businesses that could use Pulaski Street. As we know, the world famous bump outs that are there limit the parking spaces that were there anyway. So parking spaces is limited. So the size of or use of that street is limited. By going one way, they could use more parking spots. I do know Spirited and Mama's Arcade have been talking to each other about utilizing spots, and then the rest of the businesses on that street are insurance companies. But we would have to make a consideration for Sherman-Williams. A possibility for that is during Pigs and Swigs, they are given 3 parking spots in the Shea parking lot to use as their drop-off. That hasn't been a problem for the 72 hours during Pigs and Swigs, but for a month, we would have to consider that. That's one of the cons against that. Pulaski Street the rest of the way down. Obviously, you have the Alibi and the Rusty Rail. Joe's Pizza, I believe, is on that street. That would make the side that they're on would be blocked off, and that is parallel parking there. So that street is very narrow. One way would make it better. The retail establishments on the other side of the street would have parking in front of their location. Kickapoo Street, of course, you have the courthouse on one side. On the side that would be blocked off, obviously you have Guest House, Deep Roots, and you have several retail locations on that side. A couple of those retail locations would like parking opened up on their side, but they one of them has understood that a place like Guest House has no choice but to use parking spots. So, and then the Sangamon Street toward the back, that is where the Blue Dog Inn is. He did reach out to me. He would like that street to be one way. so he can put all his seating out front. He doesn't have a parking lot. There is only one location on that street, which is much further down the block from him, the Tactical Bunker. I believe they have talked already, so that street shouldn't have an issue either. I did reach out to the Idle Hour. The Idle Hour is okay with Broadway staying open where they're at because they're going to utilize the grass lot next to their facility. So all they're asking from the city is the picnic tables and the fencing to fence off that area. So that would be your locations there. The only one that's not on this map, and I didn't hear from them, is Rio Grande, which is at the end of Kickapoo Street. You have Rio Grande and Flossie and Delzina's. Already talked to Heather. She's going to use the parking spots on the Kickapoo Street side because she has the handicap spots for that block in front of her location. So it'd be more convenient for her to go out the front of her business and to the Kickapoo Street side of her business for serving tables there. Rio Grande is the next business down that street. There's no other businesses on that street on that side. But obviously, on the opposite side of the street, you have several retail businesses, including Abe's and Serenity and such. So the consideration there would be you have eating establishments on one side and retail on the other. That's why I did not mark that street. That's open for discussion.
Is there somebody else that?
Mayor?
Yes.
Jim Drew again. Hey, I'll throw out one more other idea that Lisa and I have discussed, and that's using, in order to keep Broadway open, and I totally understand where the retail businesses are coming from. But if somehow maybe we could use the parking lot behind us, it's not really, well, we'll be after the businesses are open, but right now it's not being used. But if we could set up back there possibly, Rio Grande could set back there, and even Heather. There's also that grassy lot right there next to Rio Grande. And if we did something like that, if that helps you out, all the way open for fire and emergencies, if that helps.
Mr. Welch.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Drew on that one. In talking with Mr. Rainforth called me today from Abe's, had a conversation with him, and he too had mentioned the grassy lot where we currently have the park, the welcome park there. And just a reminder that that's under contract with tourism. I think it's $1 a year, but I don't see them saying no to that. Alderman Parrott and I could have a conversation with our peers on that board and then follow through. Couple other, one other item on Sangamon up there where you see the one way for Blue Dog and Tactical Bunker. There was also discussion with the owner of the Blue Dog about going the next block to the left up there. Horrible with directions, but I would guess that'd be like south maybe. And that would accommodate Joe's as well, since they're the only business on that street. So that whole section would just be a one-way. And these one-ways can be easily accomplished with barriers, and Alderman Bateman and I talked about signage. He could work to get some signs put on there. Walt said it's okay to mount them to those barriers, similar to what we do to Third Fridays. So.
Do we have somebody else that joined the call that would like to speak?
So I think that our discussion to this point covers items the plans under item 5A, and then 5B would be the Shea parking lot and the library parking lot, the approval of use of city property. It's my understanding that's what that would accommodate. And then I do think, as Alderman Bateman said, that perhaps a member of the liquor commission, whether that be the mayor or the city administrator, can share the contents of that letter with those that might be listening or watching, so that people understand what we're voting on when we vote on 5C.
Kevin, did you have something to add?
So in my proposal that was emailed out to everybody this morning, I basically in the first part of the email, I described what we were proposing to businesses. I can quickly read it as the proposal brought forward tonight. Each business would get 3 parking spots. If more are requested, then a committee will determine whether that is feasible or warranted. Tents may be set up on the street as long as they stay within the parameters, as in within the parking areas that they're going to use, and they don't go out and impede traffic. All outdoor areas must be fenced in. That is one of the requirements. I think, John would even agree for liability purposes. We just don't want wide open areas. You're going to fence in the area you're going to use, and you need to keep your patrons inside that fenced in area, because if your parking lot ends here and someone wants to pull up to park, I don't want people honking and say, hey, get out of my way, and it end up being an argument over that. Plus, I think just for liquor purposes alone, they need to be inside a fenced-in area, no different than any of our other festivals that we have. The business would be responsible for installing that fence. They could use whatever fence they want, but again, the city would provide a minimum of 100 feet of the orange snow fence. City-owned picnic tables are available upon request with a supply while supplies last, with a maximum of 4. The city will also install signage to slow or warn traffic for the outdoor seating areas, and a liability waiver and a liquor requirement waiver will be signed by the owner of the business. That's what I put forward basically as the proposal, and that's what I've been telling most of the businesses that have contacted me. So quite frankly, if everybody agrees to that wording there, and I did reach out to Walt, he said we can easily get some signs made to hook onto barricades, whether we do go with one way or we just warn traffic to slow down. There's people in the streets. The other thing I discussed with him is the businesses that have reached out about putting up tents. During Pigs and Swigs, we run little small Tapcon screws into the street. It doesn't harm the street at all. Keeps the tent from sliding around or blowing away under a slight breeze. The business could then actually put the tent down during the evening, put it all the way down to, mine gets to about tabletop height. Then the next morning they bring it up, or we can make them take it down every night. This also would provide shade, misty rain, or ambient lighting could be hung in the tent by each business for evening hours. So that is one thing that we would have to decide. Other than that, it's really a 50-50 on the one-way street thing. So was the entire proposal. I should have started out with that. I apologize.
Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you, Alderman Bateman, Alderman Welch, Alderman Hanaki. I heard you were part of it, and everybody else who part of this, and all the time you took to really compile all the input from businesses and all that. So thank you very much. First of all, I think the one-way street is, I think it has to happen. That's just my call, my take. I think for this whole thing to work, I think that's probably what we need to be doing, to be mindful of the space limitations that this is going to pose. So you had mentioned, you just talked about the tents and taking the tents up and down. Maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but for clarification, the fencing that businesses and the businesses that are they're putting the fencing up, are they to take that down every evening? Okay, so that's that they can remain through the duration of this whole time.
Yes, I and the council can change this. I basically told each business I don't expect them to carry 10 to 12. I think Blue Dog, when they sent me the map, it's like 12 tables. I don't expect the business to carry in the tables every single night, carry in all their equipment every night. I did explain to them they are responsible for policing their area. It is not something that we're going to go around and pick up trash every night and everything. I have reached out to Area Disposal about getting some toters that we could allow them to use, so people, when they're done eating, they can at least throw their trash away right inside that area. The business could then empty that toter into their dumpster as they have. No different than when they're operating indoors. They take trash outdoors to empty it in the dumpster. Other things to note, there was questions of use of restrooms. The governor's order allows you to go in to use the restroom, come back out. You're allowed to go in and pay, come back out. You're allowed to go in and order and come back out. You're just not allowed to eat in and maintain a social distance. So basically, it's an outdoor seating location. I've done as much work as I can in such little time to try to get to this point, and we're down to crunch time. So,
Barrett?
I think just two quick questions, I guess. So you mentioned electrical. Where's the business running the electricity from?
if they have to run it from their business, that's their choice. Obviously, when the streetscape was put in on Pulaski Street, there was electrical outlets put in on Pulaski Street. Lucky for those businesses, those are there. They would have to run it from their business. The other thing I explained to each business is ADA compliance. As you know, we already have some businesses that have tables on the outside of their business. They must maintain a minimum of 4 feet on the sidewalk for allow a wheelchair to get through. They can't plug up, and that's in the state order also. They can't plug up the sidewalks or anything. That's why all of this is spilling out into the streets. So they know they have to be ADA compliant in front of their business, just as they do every day. And other than that, we're trying to figure this out on the fly.
And the reason I mentioned that, so if they're running it from their business across the sidewalk, what liability is there for the city?
I'm assuming it would be no different than pigs and swigs. They would have to cover it with a mat or just be responsible. Or I think some of them we use big heavy tape during pigs and swigs to tape those down
They would be responsible.
so that a wheelchair could, yes, that would be probably part of that waiver.
And then my last question, I believe, is what's the anticipated cost to the city for all of this? For the fencing, for the manpower to help set stuff up, as far as the barricades, for all of it. What's your
I can't answer for the manpower. I'm anticipating no more than $1,000. It would probably come in a lot less than that. Like I said, some businesses already have their own fencing. 100-foot roll of the fencing in question, I've found it in several locations for $30 a roll. Picnic tables are free, of course. We just got to move them there. I'm hoping, I've reached out to area. I'm quite confident that they will supply us with the toters. And then, as explained in the earlier meeting, it's actually, it is a cost to the city, but it's already budgeted because we cannot have third Fridays in June due to the maximum capacity limitations put on by the governor. So all the money we've budgeted for third Fridays in June could be used for this. And I'm positive it's going to be way less than the $1,000. I could be wrong. Maybe my phone will ring off the hook tomorrow and people want a bunch of fence. I don't foresee that. But that's where we're at right now.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. I'm totally in favor of the parking spaces. I'm really against the one-way traffic and the fact that you're taking away so much of the parking from the business sides of the square. The other side of the square is county controlled, and there's so many spots that are already designated for county officials and police cars and everything else. So there's very limited parking if you're just using the inside perimeter of the courthouse. Mr. Bateman talked about prior festivals and things, favoritism towards Sherwin-Williams. Well, I mean, what about the favoritism towards the other? I mean, you got Debbie's Floral, you got Rent-A-Center, you got all these other. Now you just took away all the parking in front of their businesses. Yes, they have the courthouse side, but now you got people walking across traffic, which they do now anyway, I know, but I'm just saying it's so easy just to pull right in front of a business and walk in. So I'm totally in favor of just the parking spaces. So,
Sam?
About the one way, I guess I had a couple more questions. Well, first up, I want to thank you for the visual aid. That really helps me. I'm a really visual guy. but with that, I had a couple more questions related to it. You mentioned the snow fencing. I guess I'm unclear as to what that looks like. What color is it?
That bright orange plastic fencing with the little squares.
That's what I wanted to hear. That helps. You mentioned some businesses. I'd prefer something orange that is hard to miss, I guess. And you mentioned some barricades and signage. If we do go the one, I guess I'm just worried. I'll admit it. I'm a horrible driver, and I know that there's a lot of people just like me in town. I've been driving around for 25 years, and I've driven down the wrong way, down one-way streets more times than I can count. And you're right, like that's gonna happen if we do that. Just because I've done it myself, I know how scary and how dangerous it is. I don't know. If we do go that route, I just would like as big and bright and as many signs as we can. You said $1,000 budget. Like, let's use as much of that as we can on one-way signs and safety stuff.
Steve, did you?
Yeah, so when I left the meeting last week, I drove around the square a little bit on the Broadway side. I mean, that's a wide street. There'd be no problem at all, I don't think, putting some tables out on that side. But then, if you go down Kickapoo, where they're parallel parked, by Rio Grande and Abe's and all that, that's a terrible way to do it. And I don't know how you would do it if you didn't close down the road. Well, we weren't going to close down the road on that side anyway. And so I guess my question is, if we did the parking spots, the issues that I see are on the parallel parking side, of Kickapoo, and then over by Spirit of Public and where that's just pretty narrow street with the way the parking is over there. That's not a very wide street. So I'm concerned about that one as well too. If I could be persuaded, I guess, perhaps to do parking spots over there, but I could not do in front of Rio Grande. We'd have to give them city space to use, whether it's the green space through tourism, and I'm sure tourism would allow it. This is tough. This is just a tough call.
Tracy.
Yeah, Mr. Rainforth, when he reached out to me today, was adamant that they did not want that block of Kickapoo closed off or even put down to a one-way. When Alderman Bateman and I walked the square yesterday, and we were talking with Heather from Flossie and Delzina's, it sounds like they're likely going to be up on the sidewalk, keeping that 4-foot gap for ADA compliance in mind. So I don't know how much they'd actually be in the street. But a couple other things that I thought of today regarding this one-way and specifically with Broadway. Mayor and I have been standing out after council meetings having conversations in the past multiple times in the parking lot. And we stood there and watched a car just blow right through the stoplights.
That's what I was going to mention.
Matter of fact, one night, I believe in the next block on the corner of Kickapoo and Broadway, they did the same thing, but they hit a car and they had an accident at night. And so people that, and quite honestly, that's a whole nother topic for me with these flashing red lights out here, regardless of how you feel about them. But people have got used to them. They drive through them. And if they're going to blow through them, they run the risk of hitting somebody. Furthermore, we are providing picnic tables for these businesses. Can you imagine your family being at a picnic table and seeing a car coming at you? Try to get out of a picnic table at a rapid pace and see how that works out. You're done. So, and Alderman Parrott and I, we don't always see eye to eye on things, but I will tell you, your statement last week when you made the comment about saving one life with railroad tracks and things of that nature, this holds true as well. I don't want to make a conscious decision that endangers the life of people. I think we can do this, accommodate everybody for the most part, and do it in a safe manner.
Kevin.
So I waited to hear a lot of input. I'll be the first one to admit I've dealt with street closures and heard my fair share of cussing for 10 years during Pigs and Swigs. And I'm like Alderman Welch and the mayor have watched people, as I stated earlier, plow right into a barricade. I mean, just plow right into it and drive around it, get out and move it. Every year we got people who just get out and move the barricades, and I don't care what the city says, I'm going right there, and you can't stop me. And so I would be a no vote on the one-way traffic. I know that's not a popular decision, but I agree with Sam, and I'm glad I'm never around when Sam's driving, because I like to take care of my vehicles and I don't need to meet Sam coming the other way. The point I guess I'm trying to make is I discussed with Walt, and we could get some signs made. If we left traffic the way it is, we put up some kind of barricade. He's got them big orange ones. We've all seen them at Third Fridays and stuff, the aluminum ones, that we could put up at the beginning of each area where the parking spots are blocked off. Just as a big, shiny, hey, be careful, go around this barricade because, you know, there's parking spots blocked off, and surely they'll see people by then. And luckily for us, we're going in a time of year where it stays light till 9 o'clock at night. And we just make signage the best we can to tell people to slow down, quit being an idiot, put your cell phone down, whatever, you know, be aware that there's people walking in the streets. But I would have to vote no on the streets, which then brings me to the next topic. Not just business owners reached out to me in this short amount of time between the last meeting and this one. A lot of citizens did. And the comment I heard at least a dozen times was this, and it sounds like they were in favor of the parking spots, but I didn't come right out and ask them, but you know, I thank them for their comment. The comment was always, why in the world are you guys worried about liability? You're worried about liability standing in a parking spot, but yet you got sidewalks that are so horrible in this town, people fall and break their arms every day. I kind of agree. At one point, when are we too liable? We have to help these businesses one way or another. I'm in favor of whatever the council decides, but I would be a no vote on the one-way traffic.
Any other comments?
I mean, also, I am in favor of amending something to allow the city parking lots to be utilized in the green grass area. You know, I think it's almost going to have to be a case by case basis, whether it's, you know, Gazzardo's, the Shea parking lot, or Rio with the parking lot behind them. I think that's would have to be part of the availability that we put out there too. But
I just want to
go ahead.
interrupt you real quick. Those are parking spaces we're talking about.
Correct.
Parking lot has parking spaces. So if a business, let's just say Gazzardo's reaches out and says, hey, I want my 3 parking spaces and I want them in the Shea parking lot, we can agree to that. If Rio Grande reaches out and says, I want my 3 parking spaces, and remember, in my proposal, they can ask for more than that if we deem it's warranted. And when I say warranted, if no other business around them complains and they want 6 parking spots and we give them 6, then fine. But I was trying to put forth a minimum of 3. The problem I'm having with the green spaces is it's not been the driest year, and a lawn chair would probably sink to the seat in a green space right now, or a chair, those kind of chairs. So I'd be very careful about using the green spaces. I'd be more in favor of using the hard surface areas. They're easier to clean, easier to maintain. We won't, at one point, we're going to have to mow these spaces and the business is set up in them. But just remember, the parking lots in question are also parking spaces. So that's something to consider.
Kevin, the question I have that is, if somebody does want to request additional spaces, we really have 2 days to approve that. How would we get approval? You know, I guess that's just the only question I have.
I would think it doesn't need full council approval. That's why I put the committee. They could reach out to whoever you deem as this committee that's put together. We could all just meet, have a conversation, get a consensus. Hey, I'm saying if a business wants more spaces, they shouldn't ask the city unless they've already talked to their neighbors and got the okay of, an example is Ethan. He gets the 3 spaces in front of him, but right next to him on both sides, he has a retail establishment. So before Ethan can come forward and say, I want 4 spaces, he needs to have a conversation with both of his retail customers and say, I've talked to them, here's their numbers, they agreed to give me an additional space, either to the left or to the right. And another example is Sorrento's. We give Sorrento's 3 spaces. On one side of him, he has retail establishments. On the other side, he does not. So, he could come forward and say, I want 5 spaces and I'm moving in this direction. So that's where I'm getting at on those conversations. I don't think it needs to come from the council, as long as the council agrees that a couple aldermen and the mayor can get together and make that decision.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I think I would have a document drawn up that the businesses would sign off on prior to, and then you'd have to decide, let's say, for example, of guest house situation, what parking spot is that 4th one? Is it on, to the south or to the north? And then, that other business is going to probably have to sign off on it. As I would do that rather than just say, yeah, I've spoke to them, here's their numbers, they're all good with it. And then we give it to them, they're set up, and then there's problems down the road. I just have a piece of paper, have them sign off on it, submit it to the committee, approve or, not approve.
Jim, did you have another comment?
Well, as we were sitting here listening, I totally understand not making it one way, and I'm fine with that. I guess my only comment is for you guys to consider. I think if that's the case, like I said, I'm totally okay. I think for the safety of our customers, I'd rather be in the lot behind us, and that way there's no traffic around them coming, and they're not, there's no chances of something happening. And that would free up. I mean, we're except for Heather down the corner, as far as the food establishment, we're the only 2 on that block.
Right, sure. Tracy?
So, as I sit here and listen to all this, the only way that I would be in favor of keeping those roads completely open is if Walt went and brought a barrier to those individual establishments, one on each side of the spots that they have been given, to create that barrier that Sam talks about with the bright colors, and it's clearly an indication that they need to avoid it in a moving car. We've got plenty of those barricades out at streets and alleys, and I think that would be a compromise to this solution.
Kevin?
And then the other thing I discussed with Walt, as you've all seen for 10 years, Pigs and Swigs, a few days before Pigs and Swigs start, we put the little A-frame ones out. Pigs and Swigs had signs made up that Walt's crew graciously screws to those signs that says, for your attention, this street closes at 4 o'clock on Thursday. We could have the same kind of sign that as you're entering the Pulaski Street corridor that says, caution, outdoor seating area. That person reads that, and then I agree with Tracy. Wherever Cindy or them start their parking spot, that's a barrier. She can hook the fence to it, and then the fence goes along the parking area, and then the barrier at the other end. And if the more poles they put up, it's something. I agree. All we can do is put up caution signs and warn people, even on Broadway. If Jim decides to go in the back parking lot, even on Broadway, we need to put caution. Pedestrians, outdoor seating area, please use caution while driving.
So really what we need is the council to help us set some perimeters that these businesses would operate within. And then the committee would then work with those businesses as they approach us or as they have questions, and help them stay within the confines of those perimeters, so that we're all operating in the same manner.
If that's the case, I would bring forth a motion that is worded exactly the way I sent the email out today.
Yeah, you should probably read it.
It doesn't have the barriers though, so you'll have to, and it doesn't have, we've dodged this twice now, I've mentioned it. The Liquor Commission is gonna have to speak and provide guidance on those businesses that sell alcohol or those businesses that allow BYOB. That has to be addressed as well.
John, do you want me to go, or do you want to go since you have the letter?
But the letter essentially indicates, the Liquor Commission met earlier today, and the letter essentially indicates that if a business owns or is going to be utilizing a parking lot that they might own, and essentially setting it up as a liquor essentially consumption area, they would have to essentially fence that area off with the appropriate snow fencing. Essentially, caution tape would not suffice. So if they were having an area that they were essentially setting up as like a pseudo beer garden, so to speak, they would essentially have to fence that area off. Okay, and access would only be one way. We did mention within the letter that any of the establishments would have to essentially follow the guidelines set forth by Illinois State and the Illinois Liquor Commission, that being for restroom use, paying of quote-unquote tabs or settling their accounts at the end of the night, and ordering of drinks, and the recommended various social distancing guidelines. Furthermore, the Liquor Commission left the issue in regards to the streets and the spaces to the council, because that's a question appropriate for the council. And they were silent and mute in regards to BYOB and alcohol that was being brought. That question was not presented before the council. Did not consider that a possibility. I would think that if I could just speak off the cuff in regards to it, I would think that if a business, aka like say Gazzaro's or whatnot, that previously operated as a BYOB, they would essentially could continue to do as such within their respective license, within the respective parking spots, or wherever or whatever lot that they choose to utilize that at. It's just that we're all going to have to be adults here, people. And essentially, hopefully this is only a temporary provision for only for 30 or so days. So caution is the name of the game. Respect the various social distancing guidelines. We do note that we are essentially putting faith in the businesses to reopen and operate in such a fashion. I know there will probably be temptations out there to open and just do whatever. But having said that, we are still also cautionary of, like say, you still hold state licenses, those various state licenses. We don't want to see any of our establishments have any of those put to risk. So we strongly recommend, the Liquor Commission strongly recommends adherence to those guidelines. And hopefully this will just be a temporary matter from which we can be up and going within 30 days and not have to deal with this mess anymore, so to speak.
Obviously, gambling is not allowed.
And gambling is not allowed, yes.
Right. I think Walt wanted to speak a while ago. Walt, did you want to speak? Walt, are you there? Maybe we'll come back to that. Did you hear, Kevin? Yeah.
So, before I read the email, my statement is this. I don't care if a business opens up. Open it up. For me as a councilman, I'm sitting here wishing they could all open up.
Paul, are you there?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello?
How many do we have here?
I'm sorry.
I hear a few people talking. Who's the one speaking?
This is Wanda Lee Ross.
Okay. Wanda, did you have a comment?
Yes, I had a question,
Okay.
more than a comment.
Okay.
Are you taking those?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Was the committee for this event set up at a meeting? Or, when was this committee established? I'm sorry?
It has not been established yet. At this point, Wanda, Alderman Bateman, and myself, and in collaboration with others, have got us to this point. Mostly Alderman Bateman, though.
Or situation?
Can you say that again?
Yes. Was the committee for, we should say probably situations, since we know it's not just one event, established previously? And was this committee approved by the council?
It's what, Ms. Rawls, this is Alderman Welch. There has been no item brought forth on an agenda to form this committee. It would be a temporary appointment by the mayor to get us through this period, and then that committee would cease to exist.
Well, then my question would be, if it's not an official committee, and even if it were an official committee, is the power of the entire council be taken away by the fact that a vote can be taken of this committee to make a decision for the whole council? And I don't feel that setting a precedence of a committee making a decision for the whole council rather than letting the whole council vote is something that we should start doing.
Yeah, Ms. Rawls, this is Alderman Welch again. So you have a valid point, and I agree with you. That's why prior to you dialing in, I'm not sure if you were listening online, but I made a statement that the council would give their direction by voting on the parameters that these businesses would then operate within, and that committee would then would provide guidance to those establishments through the parameters that were set. They would not have the authority to exceed those parameters that have been agreed upon by the council or the Liquor Commission.
And Alderman Keller here, I'll add to that. I think Alderman Welch said what I was going to say and add to this. They basically were appointed by the committee or by the mayor to collect information, to seek guidance from businesses, and to come and give recommendations to the council, which they have. There's no vote they took. They were just merely here to give a recommendation, and we are going to be voting tonight, giving them, as Alderman Welch said, some authority, but beyond that, there is no vote they took.
Okay, so as far as what Alderman Bateman was referring to, if a decision had to be made tomorrow on what you were discussing, then that's part of what you're voting on tonight.
Correct. That would be the parameters that this council votes on tonight based on the agenda items that have been presented on tonight's agenda.
Put on the agenda.
Wanda, this is Alderman Bateman. I think what you're referring to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the additional parking space conversation if a business wanted more than 3. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, yes, the item that you were just discussing a minute ago, and I think there is more to that, Mr. Bateman, than just the picnic tables.
Well, I was just referring to the 3 parking spots that, and maybe the use of the word committee is the wrong thing to use here, but in trying to do this to accommodate businesses without constantly calling special meetings, it was basically asking the council to give the authority to two aldermen and the mayor, and it could be any two aldermen, to if a business reaches out to them and asks for an additional parking space, that those two aldermen that the business is out to explains their situation, explains their need, and then it would be up to those three individuals to determine whether the additional parking, use of a parking space is warranted to facilitate that business. Again, it could be any two aldermen. I was just referring to the fact that instead of trying to call a special meeting, the mayor would give the authority to two aldermen and himself to determine the additional parking space if needed.
Okay, so in this particular situation, that might work, but I would be very cautious as to start anything where a committee has the power to override the entire council.
Yeah, I think we all
Agreed.
understand that. I don't think that it's a long-term solution. It's just to get by given the situation and the urgency to do such.
Okay, well, as long as it's clarified in the minutes so that we know that is the fact.
Right.
Thank
Yep.
you.
You bet. Thank you.
Anyone else on that?
Is there anyone else on the line as well that wants to speak?
Mayor Goodman, I have one more comment.
Yes. Yep.
Obviously, we're sitting here talking. You know, it seems to make sense to, and Lisa and I was talking about this, to keep the parking spots open for the retail businesses. And the reason I say that too is they have been closed all this time where we have been opened. So if we can move around to the back and allow like Hallmark to have, and the antique store next to us, have more open spaces in front of that store, you know, that seems pretty reasonable on their request to ask for those spaces to be open.
Thank you. Does anyone have any further input or comments? Ms. Calvin?
Okay, yes, I didn't know I had the mic. Okay, we've been through this before years and years ago, and it just takes a lot of everyone's cooperation. And I think knowing that they're going to have alcohol out there, we need everybody to make sure that they self-police their businesses so that this is a smooth transition for everyone, that we all have a good time and keep the place clean and that kind of thing. So I'm thinking everyone's going to be excited about doing that, and it's going to be a good thing for people.
Chief Adams, did you have any input or questions regarding this?
Thank you, Mayor, for the quick moment. Just one thing is, when we're doing these outdoor gardens, I'd like to see the fire department, the fire chief, and maybe the code enforcement officer make sure they're inspecting these areas for those code violations or any safety issues that may arise. And I don't know if this is something the city can look into purchasing, as maybe those concrete dividers to help protect those areas, especially at the beginning of a block or something to that effect, for those drivers that don't like to pay attention. I think we had 6 accidents just today, so people not paying attention. So those are just a couple of my concerns. I don't like one way. I think that's going to be a bigger issue in the long run.
Fire Chief, did you have any comment with regards, I think somebody posed the question of outdoor fire pits and things along those lines at their establishments. Do you want to comment on that at all? Bob, do you want to? Oh. I'm trying here. Okay.
He's going to walk
Yeah,
the
he's gonna
15
come in.
feet.
Walt's been trying to talk for a while.
I was gonna say, I don't think he heard me earlier when I asked him if he wanted to speak.
Yeah, he answered you, but we're on a time
Oh.
delay, and then somebody else started talking over him, so he
Okay.
needs to talk. I've talked to Kevin this morning about the outdoor fire pits and things outside. I am not recommending that for the businesses. When somebody has a weenie roast at home, according to the city ordinance, they have to tend the fire all the time. They can only burn small areas. I don't recommend with the alcohol and the businesses and what they're gonna be doing outside to have fire pits. There's too much that can go wrong.
I like the outdoor heaters that people have, those tall ones.
Right. I mean, if they're gonna need something like that outside, I talked with Kevin this morning. If they wanted to have a fire pit, it's just not gonna be feasible with alcohol involved, being able to tend it all the time, having the water source available, and being able to be 50 feet from the businesses and structures. So, no on the fire pits for the outdoor businesses.
Got it. Walt?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, I was going to mention what Paul mentioned about making sure that we inspect those areas that are to be used, just for safety purposes. We could be experiencing a shortage of barricades also with the Union Street project changing in the way it is. So we need to think about that also.
Kevin?
So before we move forward here with the vote, Walt, does this street and alley department have access to, or we could reach out to the county? Paul suggested that, depending on the number of businesses that, and I know for a fact Alibi has to set up out front of their business. They don't have a choice there. Does the city own any of those portable concrete barricades like you see along the highways and stuff for temporary construction?
We have a limited number. It just depends on how many we would need for how many locations.
Well, we're talking like if you can envision coming down Pulaski Street toward the square, and Cindy at the Alibi has the spots in front of her business, right there at the alley, set one of those barricades up so someone doesn't actually swerve over right at the alley, and then she could run fencing the rest of the way, the length of her parking spots, and just the areas that would warrant a little bit stringer barricade type. Earlier in the meeting, I didn't know if you was listening, I suggested those big tall aluminum ones you have, but as Paul suggested, maybe the concrete one would be better if we do have a limited number. Again, everything we have is limited number. We've never been down this avenue before.
I think the larger ones that we usually use to close the street off for the festivals, we should have enough of those available to be able to cover what we need. If we wanted to put the blocks, I just can't say for sure, but we probably have access to 5 or 6 of them maybe. So I would use them in conjunction with one another if we're going to do that. If I was going to put a block there, I'd want to put one of the larger barricades also.
Once this vote passes, I could reach out to the businesses that would be using parking spaces on the street, not in parking lots, to determine and get with Walt and his guys to determine where we would place those barricades, because I think the liability lies more in the parking spaces on the street than it does the ones in the parking lots.
Jeff?
Walt, I had a question as Jeff Einake. Would you be able to maybe reach out to the county as far as maybe borrowing or using some barricades in a short-term fashion with the Union Street project until the new contractor comes in with their equipment or something? Or
They're fairly limited too.
okay.
I think if we can stick with the larger ones, just basically downtown, the Union Street is going to take up a lot of our smaller stuff, covering potholes and things like that. So where they pothole for utilities, So I think the bigger barricades should have plenty of. It's the smaller ones that we'll be limited on, and we can probably work something out.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? Is there anyone else on the phone that would like to speak? Okay. Yep, Kevin, go ahead.
So, any changes can be made. I'll read this again. What we're voting on tonight is each business will get 3 parking spots. If more is requested, and I'm going to take out the word committee, then we'll insert a group of 2 aldermen and the mayor. Will determine whether it is feasible and warranted. Tents may be set up on the streets as long as they stay within the parameters of their parking spaces. All outdoor areas must be fenced in. I'm assuming the council is going to hold that true to the parking lot spaces also, that if you're using a parking lot space, you must fence it in. So any would have to be fenced. This would cover the alcohol portion. The city would provide a minimum of 100 feet of fencing. That business is responsible for the installation of that fencing. City-owned picnic tables will be available upon request, while supplies last, with a maximum of 4. The city will also install signage to slow and warn traffic in outdoor seating areas. A liability waiver will be required to be signed, and a liquor requirement letter will be required to be signed by the owner of the business.
Tracy?
So I was trying to write all this down while you guys were having that barrier discussion, and then put it into a Word doc so that this can be actually distributed. And so I think I encompassed what Alderman Bateman just read off. I also included the no fire pits are permitted.
I want to clarify that, and Chief can walk back in here if he needs. The request we had earlier today was for an actual fire pit, open fire type pit, adding wood. I'm assuming the chief would be okay with the portable propane type heaters that you've seen other businesses use if it's needed, if the temperature gets down. That isn't an open flame. They usually have safeties when they're tipped over. But this question that got brought up today was for an open fire.
Okay, so what I put in here was no burning fire pits are permitted in outdoor dining areas. I did put in here the liquor pieces to this, that the liquor requirement letter must be signed by establishments that serve alcohol or allow customers to bring their own alcohol. Liquor is only permitted in approved roped-off areas, and alcohol in outdoor dining areas must be served in plastic single-serving cups. Also, we had a discussion earlier about electric cords, and that electric cords are permitted as long as they are secured to sidewalks properly to prevent trip hazards. And that tents are permitted by establishments within approved parking spaces. What else did I miss?
Beth?
I just wanted to ask again about the electricity. You mentioned streetscapes, but I wasn't here when you did some of that. I don't know if everyone will be providing their own electricity.
Yes.
Well, what I was discussing is on Pulaski Street, those businesses are lucky, and when we redid Pulaski Street, there was electrical outlets installed, I believe, at the base of every one of those trees, and I think that power stays on all the time. So they lucked out and had power, but that's just one side of the street.
I think it should be, business should be paying for that.
Tracy, I don't know if you said in there or not, but, and it's kind of inferred, but what about the sidewalks and making sure they don't block those?
Oh, correct. The 4-foot passage.
And that their fencing cannot be on the sidewalk.
Fencing is only required in the designated parking spots, or if you are an establishment somewhere other than downtown, Lincoln, let's say, I'm just gonna pull one off the top of my head here, Foxhole Pub and Grill. I believe they're gonna use their parking lot. In that conversation with her, I'm assuming we're all gonna stick with it. She must have a fenced-in area, beer garden or whatever, and all alcohol has to stay within that fenced-in area. We're not just gonna allow people to roam their parking lot freely, just because they own the parking lot. So I don't know if that needs to be added to the liquor letter or can be added to both. But if any alcohol is served, it has to be in a fenced-in area. If you're using city property, you have to be in a fenced-in area.
Kevin, can you, because you put this in your approval or your proposal to the council, can you elaborate a little bit on what that liquor requirement letter might state? I don't remember having that conversation with you, but I mean, it's a good idea. I just want to know what that encompasses.
Well, quite honestly, I don't know, because I formed that email at 6 o'clock this morning and the liquor committee had not met yet. I just knew that there was going to be recommendations from the liquor committee. So I kind of threw that in the email for whatever they voted on, that needed to be in that also.
Are you guys requiring that?
I mean, I think a lot of it can be added into the same one, because it really is just stating that, again, the alcohol is to be consumed within the fenced area only, and then also to follow the orders in terms of usage of bathrooms and ordering and paying and things like that. So I don't know that we need to have a separate one. John, do you?
It sounds like to me that if you're looking to essentially have a notice to the various businesses that will avail themselves to this, essentially, if you're looking for like a liability waiver of some sort, then, you know, I believe there are some discussions that the businesses that would utilize these spaces, or just probably any of them in general that even utilize their parking lot, would have to essentially sign off that essentially they would be told certain things about the recommendations of the city council, their stipulations, so they're put on notice of essentially what the council is allowing or is not allowing, and they consent to it as well. And then they also consent to any danger that might come upon them. If, you know, they're having patrons out on the road, which just is innately dangerous. So they would also be acknowledging that as well, and be accepting liability of that as well.
So this letter would need to go to all restaurants and bars, but are you saying that only those utilizing city areas need to sign? Because the rest will be on their personal owned property.
The only request on people using their personal property the alcohol would have to be in a fenced-in area. Right. So, for instance, when Blue Dog reached out to me, they're going to use the grass lot. They're going to allow alcohol out there, even though it's their lot. They need to fence it.
Not the Blue Dog. You mean Rusty Rail?
Idle Hour.
Idle Hour.
Rusty Rail is going to use their parking lot in back. Don't know if they're going to spill over into the street, but their first request was for their parking lot in the back. Told them it had to be fenced off, and all the alcohol had to stay in the fencing. So even if it's in there, I don't know if they have to sign the waiver, but it needs to stay in their fenced area. The one thing I just thought of is, obviously we need to ask for proof of liability insurance, and keep that on file unless that is part of their liquor license.
Yeah,
So ask for proof of insurance. Surely they can get us that really quick. Again, they're using city-owned property, so that that's part of the liability part. But yes, any alcohol needs to be in a fenced-in area, whether it's on your own personal property or city-use street.
Okay. Is there any other?
Mr. Howlett.
Oh, go ahead.
I could just essentially add it as a paragraph in there that said, if you're utilizing city property, then this following waiver must be signed and returned before you can essentially open and operate. It also might behoove these businesses that are going to be utilizing the city streets in regards to their spaces. And this is something, I don't know, that's what I'm saying. They probably should reach out to their insurer to see if they'll even insure them if they're going to be on the street. So that's also, I believe, a point that probably should be made to those businesses as well. Because if you're making a requirement that they provide proof of insurance for them to operate on the city street, and then their insurance company does not provide said proof or will not insure them for anything that occurs there, then they're kind of stuck. So I don't know if you necessarily want that to make that a requirement for them, or just make it so whatever the business is aware and note that any liability that occurs is upon them. So
I'm thinking just proof of insurance. Just my personal opinion, I don't think they need to call their insurance company, and
They need to sign the waiver as well.
they need to sign the waiver and just show us that they have current liability insurance for their business. Any reputable business owner would have that.
Steve?
Do we know if any establishment that has a beer garden, if their insurance looks any different from any of those that would not have a beer garden?
I don't think so. It's part of their property, and the license covers consumption on their property.
And I think that's my point, though, because there'll be consumption not on the business's property, and so there could be the strong possibility that their insurance company, would not be insuring them. They have proof of insurance, but they wouldn't necessarily. That insurance may not cover anything that would happen on city property, and even if they sign a waiver, if someone was to get injured, and their insurance company goes, "No, we're not insured. We didn't insure them. Go after the city." So now the city's liable. Even if they signed it, they're still going to sue the city.
Travel it.
that's why I indicated there probably should be some stipulations within there that encourage them to reach out to their insurer, and essentially that their insurer might or might not cover them. And if they do not cover them, then they're taking that risk upon themselves. Now, having said that, as I understand with most liquor establishments and bars, they have not only general liability insurance, but they have something called dram shop insurance, which will essentially protects the actual consumption. I mean, there's a general liability for, like, say, accidents that occur, somebody falls or something of that nature on your place of business, but then the dram shop kicks in with, say, someone who consumes alcohol and then leaves or consumes alcohol. And there's questions of, did they overserve? Should they have cut this person off? Did this person get in an accident after they leave? And unfortunately, something happened to somebody. That's when the dram shop insurance kind of kicks in. And usually the actual drinking aspects, that's what covers. So they need to really need to have a talk with their insurance company about both the general liability and the dram shop, because if the general liability is for their premise, and if their premise does not, I could see a insurance company saying, well, the premise does not extend into the city street and you're on your own. So that's something that they need to be made aware of and reach out to their insurer. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not the insurance company, but I know there's a building and there's a city street, and they're not the same. And just because we're saying that we're extending it out to them does not necessarily mean the insurance company is going to agree. So, and I think we've all known that most insurance companies, given the opportunity to get out of something, they have a tendency to try. So that's just, the businesses need to know about this. They need to know what they're getting into, okay? Because I believe that's fair to them. I believe the letter should encompass at least some stipulations that encouraging them to reach out to their various insurance companies at least for regards to liability.
Mr. Welch.
Did the city administrator have something also? Or?
That's where I was talking with Alderman Parrott, referring back, they need to be self-policing on this, because with more and more people hired from the Illinois Liquor Control Commission, they'll be out and about, not possibly here, but they might be, and we will not have any kind of responsibility for that if something goes wrong.
Trace.
Okay, so let me go down this list because this is what we'll be voting on, so there's no confusion. And this this would encompass 5A and 5B as well. A minimum of 3 parking spots are permitted. More can be allowed with committee approval, taking into consideration the needs of adjacent businesses. A maximum of 4 picnic tables allowed per establishment on request while tables are available. The city will provide a maximum of 100 feet of snow fencing or approved barriers. Or minimum.
Minimum of 100 feet, because I know a couple's going to need more than 100 feet. I will try to procure as much as I can. If you think about it, Steve, when we measured parking spots, 3 parking spots, by the time you go out 20 feet over 3, a diagonal parking spot was 19 feet. So by the time you go out 20 feet, over 3 spots, back in 20 feet, you're pushing the 100-foot. So we would give them 1 roll. It's a 100-foot roll. If they need more, we'll provide it.
What is the maximum we'll provide?
But for those businesses that have their own parking lot and they wanted to make it a huge area, are we going to supply 300, 400 feet?
4 rolls. We'll do 4 rolls maximum. I doubt if we'll get to that point, but I'm trying to make it as easy as I can for each business, unless you want to make it less.
Are you okay with 400 feet, or would you, or do you want
make it
less?
1,000 feet? I mean,
Well,
we're just changing things.
no, I would
before we
say-
said 100 when the thing all started, and so now it's up to 400.
I'm okay, honestly, with 100. I think 100 feet will do it. But we do have the budget within our Third Friday committee because of June being canceled to accommodate easily 200 feet.
I think I
Kevin?
would say 200
We'll give them a minimum of 1 roll, maximum of 2.
Okay. So, are you okay with that, Steve?
Oh, I'm fine with that. I just
Yeah, I know we shifted course on us. Okay, so city will provide a maximum of 200 feet of fencing or approved barriers to fence off dining areas. Approved barriers cannot be used on sidewalks. Tables are permitted on sidewalks, but must allow for 4 feet of passage to meet ADA requirements. Go ahead.
Back to your fencing section, you need to add in that the business is responsible for erecting the fence.
an approval by city code officer.
Okay. City will provide a maximum of 200 feet of fencing or barriers to fence off outdoor dining areas. The business is responsible for erecting the fence and must be approved by the code enforcement officer. Cool. Moving on to tables on the sidewalks, 4 feet of passage for ADA requirements. The use of tents are permitted only within approved parking spaces. Electric cords are permitted as long as they are secured to sidewalks properly to prevent trip hazards.
Tracy, just backing up, do you want to say that tents need to be secured too? Because with the winds we have, I mean, that could be an issue.
Walt, what would you like that to be? You and I talked earlier. What is the maximum size hole you're going to allow in a city street? I know I've always secured mine during Pigs and Squigs with just a 1/4-inch Tapcon, and it's never blown away.
That's fine. But I think that, like you said earlier, that they probably should have to be lowered or removed. My concern is with those is that, you know, we get wind or get a storm, they're going to become missiles. If they get knocked loose or blow away. So I think they need to be lowered and secured or removed overnight or during off hours. But the 1/4-inch Tapcon in the roadway, I'm fine with that.
So I said, if they are left in the parking spaces overnight, they must be secured to the street using Tapcons or other approved devices.
Collapsed, if they're collapsible.
They must be collapsed, if possible, and secured to the street. Okay. Anything else on tents?
I just wanted to mention that I did have a vendor for the snow fence I found today. We get a 100-foot roll, a 4-foot tall fence for $24 a roll.
Okay.
I'm saying order 20 rolls.
How fast can you get it, Walt?
You think that's enough?
I can have it tomorrow.
So you can be
Not
overnight.
enough, right?
Purposes.
Order 20 rolls, and then if we need to order more, we can get them overnight.
But I'm saying, do you think 20 is enough?
That's what I'm saying. We can always use it later on for other purposes.
Yeah, because if some of the
Do
other
you have a
businesses-
use for it, Walt, if we order more than 20
have a-
rolls?
Do you have a recommendation, Seth?
Well, I'm just thinking, like,
Normally don't have a use for it. Actually, we've gotten rid of some of it in the past.
Oh, okay.
how many establishments are there total, roughly?
The ones using this city streets, probably at least 10. So if we did maximum two rolls per business, that's 20.
So
if he
we're-
can get it overnight, I say he can have 20 tomorrow, and maybe we have to get 20 more the next day.
Right, but if some of the other establishments are wanting to use their parking lots, are we not?
They still
providing-
have to get fence, yeah, from us. We're
That's what
going
I'm saying, though. That's not going to be enough then, just 20.
Well, if they're using a parking lot, they can barricade the entrance to their parking lot, and that would serve as, if that lot is small, I'm thinking,
Right. But if some of them have alcohol, it has to be in a fence.
do you want to do 30 rolls in?
I was thinking 40, but
40? I'd rather have not enough and order some than order way too
because
much.
But
Friday
if-
is 2 days from tomorrow, and they're going
if
to be
he can
open.
get it overnight, 20 rolls tomorrow. At the end of tomorrow, we'll know if we need 20 more rolls.
Well, they're not going to set up until Friday, though. Then we won't be able to get it over the weekend. Just order 40.
Okay, I don't know if he has that many in stock, but he can bring me what he has.
Okay.
I would say get as many as you can up to 40.
And to ensure that we're doing this properly, because this is an expense, I'm asking the mayor if you are authorizing the expense for the fencing.
Absolutely.
It would be either out of his fund or the Third Friday fund, but we don't have authority on the Third Friday committee to make such purchases, so
I mean,
that's why I'm asking the mayor.
I think it's the least the council can do to help the businesses since they've been closed as long as they have. So, I mean, I personally have no objection to it at all.
Agreed. I just want to make sure it was approved, an approved expense.
Fully approved.
Okay.
Mr. Bateman?
Next item was electric cords are permitted. I've said that multiple times. Proof of liability insurance must be submitted to the city clerk's office. Businesses that sell alcohol are encouraged to consult with their insurance company to verify insurability for this period. A liability waiver must be signed by all establishments that choose to take advantage of outdoor dining. Alcohol is only permitted in approved roped-off areas. Alcohol in outdoor dining areas must be served in plastic single-serving cups. The city will provide barricades and signage to instruct drivers to slow down outdoor dining ahead. No burning fire pits are permitted in outdoor dining areas. My question to that one is, should we also, I know common sense is a part of this, but should we also say on sidewalks or in outdoor dining areas?
One other thing, going back to one you just said a minute ago, I think you said alcohol in roped off areas. Do you want to specify alcohol within fenced in areas?
Yes. In approved fenced in areas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Walt, is there a way that you could come up with wording or a design using emojis or whatever you want to do and get with a local printer to make, I would say, a minimum of 10 to 20 signs that we could put on some of these barricades, warning of outdoor seating area ahead, or slow pedestrian, they're not pedestrians, but something that we can put ahead of them seats.
About getting them before Friday, I don't know about that.
Let's see what Lincoln printers might be able to do. We've used them for Third Fridays. Maybe they can give us something temporary to get going.
We have several local printers. Maybe we could just,
yeah, that's true.
reach out to several.
Yep.
If we decide to get 20, if there's 2 people available to get it done by Friday, split it up 50-50. Just that whiteboard stuff like we've used, just giving some kind of caution.
You might want something reflective in the evenings because it'll still be fenced in, fenced off.
High vis lettering or something.
So you want me to work on that then?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, the city will provide barricades and signage to instruct drivers to slow down. Outdoor dining ahead. No burning fire pits are permitted on sidewalks or in outdoor dining areas. Establishments may allow customers to use indoor restrooms, but they may not remain indoors for dining or consumption of alcohol. Limited use of city parking lots may be permitted based on committee approval.
Steve?
We don't have to have those last two. I was thinking I would throw them on there.
I say, take the one off that they may not may not serve in their place of business inside or not.
The restroom usage.
Well, no, I know, but I don't know that we have to say it. If they open
Okay.
it up, if their business opens up, they want to serve, food and whatever in their place of business, and we're not going to prosecute or to, fine them or anything like that. Let them do it.
Okay, I removed it.
I do agree with Steve. We should just worry about wording for outdoor use. They can use the inside of that building to do whatever they
I
want.
think the only verbiage that Liquor Commission talked about adding on there was to make sure that they still understand that they are under the guidance and supervision of the state.
And then I have one more quick question. So, in the event that there happens to be an accident, major, minor accident, whatever, let's say in day one, do we still continue with this, or does it shut down?
I think it'd have to be something that would have to be evaluated at that time. It's just like if a fair has an incident or, the festival that was downtown or the Balloon Fest or anything like that, you just have to evaluate it at that time. I don't know that you can really think ahead in terms of that just because you never know what could happen. That's just my thought on that. I don't know how you could really prepare accordingly because it could just be that a car maybe hits a part of a fence or it could be that they go into a whole, hopefully not, crowd. But I think you would have to just kind of play that by ear. But that's just my opinion anyway. Kathy?
Tracy, did I hear you say anything about wearing masks, or did you not?
We did not.
I think you just were going
Like
to say
something?
proper social distancing.
So I agree that needs to be in there, but the guidelines that we just talked about with the restrooms, that's part of the executive order, right? And the masks and social distancing are as well. If you'd like it in here just to reiterate that and drive it home, we can put it in here.
I
It's up to you
think
guys.
it's going to state in that to refer to the guidelines anyway, correct? Issued. Right. But you're saying if people go in and use the restroom, they have to have a mask on?
No. I was just saying if they go in to use the restroom, they just can't stick around and have a beer and eat. They
Right.
need to go
Yeah,
in
and that's kind of,
facilities and get
John,
out.
correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where, like on the Liquor Commission, we just said to refer to the guidelines issued by the state and leave it at that.
Per guidelines of the executive order. Let's face it, that may change every day.
And we can put a line on this document that says, for all other questions, please refer to the governor's executive order or whatever we want to do. Or call your alderman and the mayor.
Yeah, Kathy, I think in regards to the question there, I think it'd be hard for us now to say you have to wear a mask somewhere when, again, we were kind of hands off on that. And a lot of the establishments that even said they were going to require it are no longer doing that. So I don't know that we want to specifically say that, but I think it's a good question to ask for sure.
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
I had one more.
Jeff?
Yeah, having mention of trash pickup and policing up,
The city will provide
or
trash receptacles.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
we can't make that commitment because we
Right.
haven't got confirmation
Right.
from area, but I really don't see them pushing back on us on this one.
We will try to provide them toters, but they are responsible for their own trash. The city will not take trash out of their areas. We're just going to try to provide outdoor trash receptacles for them to use in their area.
Second, by the way, we had a motion.
Okay. Kevin made the motion. Ron seconded. Is there any further discussion on this topic? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that encompassed A and B?
Yes. Yes, Mayor.
Okay, so we still have item C
Correct.
in regards to the letter that John had sent out, or city attorney had sent out earlier.
That's in that paragraph.
That's what I say. Is that still something that, so we can remove that, or, so do we need a,
Motion to adjourn.
No.
but do we need a motion to
Oh.
remove it, or to?
I think we have to remove the item.
Right.
Item C.
Yeah, we need a motion to
Plan C.
remove, correct?
Plan C.
Move it or table it.
Make a motion to remove item C.
Second.
Kevin made the motion, Jeff seconded. Any discussion?
Just that
It's included.
it's included, right? We're not removing it just because we're removing it.
So while we're on that topic then, so is it one letter is going to be issued?
It would be, wouldn't it still be two?
It would be one encompassing everything.
It would be a letter, the liability waiver that they must sign. And I would ask if Alderman Bateman could draft that up in collaboration with the city clerk's office if necessary, or the city attorney. The insurance liability, proof of liability insurance needs to be provided to the city clerk's office. And then this guidelines document that we've all agreed to and approved this evening will accompany those papers to those establishments.
Mr. Hoblet?
And just for some clarification, you said the general liability, the general insurance. So I understand that most of these establishments have already, in order for them to operate within the city of Lincoln, have already provided proof of insurance. So the city is already sitting upon that. So is the idea is that they would reach out to the insurance company about what they're looking to do in regards to either on the street or on their parking lots, various parking lots, and provide insurance proof there? Is that what the council is desiring? And in the event that they're not able to procure, or that the insurer will not cover them, I don't know. I know you guys probably don't want this meeting to go for much longer, but in the event that they're not able to provide, like, say, proof of insurance, like say being on the city street, are you allowing them to operate with the idea that anything happens, they're responsible, or that you're just not going to let them operate? So there probably should be some guidance there, because there's a little bit of ambiguity.
Kevin?
So to try to keep this simple, if they already have insurance on file at the clerk's office, which the clerk could check that, as stated, if they're a restaurant, they have insurance because they have to have a food handler's license, or you don't have. So we only have insurance on file for liquor. So a restaurant would need to prove they have insurance, and I'm asking the attorney to draft a simple liability letter that can be attached, and that liability letter would basically explain that the city is not held liable and your insurance would be liable, and then they would have to fight it out with their insurance company. They can either reach out to their own insurance company and get extra insurance, or they can just go with what they have, knowing that they've signed a liability letter with the city.
Peggy, did you have a comment? Okay, John?
I would just ask that just to essentially, instead of saying the insurance company be responsible, just say the business, and it's incumbent upon the business to reconcile that with the insurance company. And if they cannot, then they're taking the brunt of the liability, and then just make them aware of that.
So all this is being drafted and dispersed when and how? Yesterday.
We'll do our best to have it done by Thursday so they can open Friday. And I hate to say it, I'm reaching out again. There's a lot of businesses that did not respond at all to either the Facebook post, phone calls, or anything. Sam knows one that I've tried to reach out to several times with 0 comments. So I guess that's the thing. If we don't hear from a business at all and got no documentation, what is the city going to do?
John?
Cracker Barrel. What are we going to do if Cracker Barrel doesn't contact us at all and they set up dining outside of their establishment?
Well, and technically they're allowed, so, but John?
Well, I know you said Mr. Bateman and the clerk in conjunction with me, if you want, I'm relatively efficient at cementing these in a written format. If you would like, I could probably have a draft out by noon tomorrow, and we can critique it from there. Hopefully by maybe midday or at the latest Thursday, it can go out.
Yeah. So again, if they don't submit it, then I mean, technically they can still operate. I mean,
I'm just asking each alderman, if we don't hear from businesses, each alderman, I don't care, call a business. If they hear from 6 aldermen, then they hear from 6 aldermen. We passed this, what are you going to do? What's your plans? There's plenty,
Peggy.
places that we haven't heard from.
But if places like have their own property, let's say Emos, they have their parking lot, that's theirs. As long as they're not on city property, why do they need to reach out to us?
I agree, but what about the places, BYOB places and stuff? I mean, there's some of those. So that's the thing there.
So the reason we put these guidelines together is to touch base on those items that we felt were critical and would provide guidance to those restaurants or bars that wanted to open back up. But ultimately, as Kathy had mentioned in the last meeting, these businesses know what they need to be doing for their businesses, and we need to empower them to do so. And we will not police them, but if there is a situation where alcohol is witnessed outside of a barrier, that's no different than in today's world right now, where illegal consumption and open carry laws would apply. And I would assume the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but his department would then take the appropriate action in those situations, case by case basis.
So can't the city just issue a letter and let them? I mean,
move forward and consult us if you have questions.
That's what I say. Just issue the letter and say, I mean,
these are basically businesses using, this encompasses 2 types of business. A business using city property.
Right.
And places like Foxhole, again, I'll use that one for an example, that want to establish a beer garden and they don't have one. So they would have to fence that in. There's, as the city clerk mentioned, there's places that have their own property. Lucky Dog, that's been on Facebook. He has his own beer garden. It's fenced in. He's good. So places that don't have an established beer garden would need to get with us to get the fencing and follow the rules saying if you're going to have alcohol outside, it's got to be in a fenced-in area, and businesses using city-owned property.
Probably.
I would say I'd counsel the council that if you're going to be the business that are definitely using the city streets for their spaces should definitely sign a waiver, an acknowledgement, a receipt, and sign that preferably in front of a notary. The reason why is because, they might be running in a situation where their liability insurance does not cover them on a city street because it only covers them inside their building. And then if something were to happen, then they're turning around and coming to the city. It was like, well, it's on a city street.
Right.
So
those will be easier to obtain because you're going to have to approve their spots anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, but the other ones, what I'm saying, is going to be where the issue is if you're going to make them all sign.
So my question then would be to those individuals on the Liquor Commission in this room right now is if an established bar wanted to, let's say, have a Saturday celebration where they allowed consumption in their parking lot and roped off their parking lot, under normal circumstances, do they come to you for approval or they can operate in that manner on their property?
Well, before we usually have asked for the zoning inspector to go out and make sure there should only be one ingress and egress from the actual bar itself, in and out. You cannot have an open gate. It could be locked, by the owner, have it locked, but no patrons coming in and out from the outside. So it should.
What I'm talking about is a parking lot party.
Right.
Let's say,
something like that. They really need to come to the Liquor Commission about. But
do they today?
I don't know if
The-
they
the-
have or not. Now,
The
if they've
question,
already,
the question I have, I know it's not long term, but like when Spirited or Alibi during Third Fridays, do they sign a waiver of liability when people are in the roads?
We submit a request for road closures
Right.
for Third Fridays, and they are participants in that event. Therefore, they're covered under that. They're covered under that request, but their liquor license would be between them and the Liquor Commission, not the Third Friday event. We've just operated in that fashion and have not had any issues in that manner.
Right.
Not to say that there might not be, but I'm just saying we've been
John.
lucky so far.
I believe that's a little bit different scenario because you have a whole road closure there, and these are just various parking spots, and it's a city sanctioned, event. Even though the city is sanctioning this, so to speak, it's just a different scenario. Like I said, that's different because, like I say, for the Pigs and Swigs or the Third Fridays, you have volunteers, and which are usually encompass various aldermen and whatnot, essentially putting the event on. So it's just it's a different scenario. So
Right. Yeah, I was just asking for reference. So when this form goes out, it's just going to state that if you are asking or requesting city property for your establishment, this form must be signed before you can operate. Okay. Well, then that's easy enough. I mean,
And John, you said this should be signed by a notary.
yeah, in front of a notary.
Okay. Well, I'm a notary, and so are two other people in our office. We can drop them off and notarize as we go. If that's what it takes on Friday.
yeah, and I think it needs to state it. I mean, because sometimes they just have an employee sign. It's got to be the
owner.
owner signature on that document. Steve?
Yeah, and before any fencing is given out, that this all
Right.
needs to be signed off on prior to.
Yeah, they would obtain the fencing as they.
I was going to draft up a simple letter that as we pass this out, they would sign. I got my 2 rolls of fencing. I got my 3 picnic tables. They signed. Obviously, when it's all over, we're going to go back and get our 3 picnic tables. It's their fence unless they want to give it back to us or whatever.
I don't want to get super detailed on a letter that goes out. Can it just state that there are several individuals at City Hall that can notarize so they can turn it in, sign it at that time? Because otherwise you're going to be getting signed forms with no notary in.
And they're not to sign unless the notary is
Right.
present. So
And that's what I'm thinking. You're going to be getting forms that aren't
I'll
notarized.
hand it to them if
Right.
and go with the letter if that's what it takes.
Right.
Just get it. We'll just get it done.
You're stating that a member of the clerk's office is willing to go to the establishment and witness them signing it in front of him.
We have to witness before we notarize it.
So any alderman that gets a question, if they get the question of how am I going to sign this form, they can reach out to the clerk's office and the clerk will make arrangements to sign and notarize that form in front of them.
Like I said, we can walk around with the paper and hand it and do it right there, if that's what it takes.
Yeah, and then in terms of disbursement of the form, are we just going to post it on the city and have the media?
That was my question. Is next steps communication plan, and I would say that we do that the way that we normally do. Post it on the city website, like these guidelines, and then maybe a PDF of the form, the liability
I
form
think
that needs filled
Peggy
out.
can just send it out like normal to the media. I mean, is that right?
Facebook.
Well, I mean, no, I can share that, but I did get a message today from a media source saying that we need to send them more, and so I mean, I guess we'll just, yeah, that's what I'm saying. As soon as we get the form, and we want to make sure they have it too, obviously. But I mean, I'm happy to share it. We can share it on the city website, Facebook, and then make sure that the media gets it as well. So, Mr. Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this thing working?
Yes.
Okay. Alderman Bateman, you mentioned having contacted businesses. Did I understand that correctly? You've called, in addition to the Facebook post and all that, you've actually called all of them that would be potentially affected by this, and some of them just didn't
I have
bother?
not called all. I've called quite a few.
Okay. I just, because a lot of them won't see Facebook posts.
I have tried to reach out to nearly every individually owned business. I'll admit I didn't call any corporate businesses. I didn't call Culver's or McDonald's or Cracker Barrel or anything like that. I tried to reach out to locally owned businesses to let them know that we were doing everything possible to help them out to open up.
Those wouldn't be affected anyway. They wouldn't be using city parking lot or a city street, they'd be using their own, and they don't serve alcohol or allow alcohol.
It sounds like everyone that would use city you guys have been in touch with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you going to draft the media response? Whatever gets sent out? Because I think it also needs to go to the Courier too.
Well, that's what I'm
Like
saying.
all
Yeah,
media paper too.
she'll send it to all the media once we have the official
What is it's being sent though?
whatever it is that you're
What-
wanting the restaurants to.
What we voted on in the
Yes.
official
The
forms.
guidelines and then the statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it will just have the information, I'm assuming, on the form about signatures and notarizing and where to deliver and how to,
Right, and it'll go out to the council as a whole, just so, I mean, for edits and whatnot, before it actually goes out. Cognizant of the timeliness of this, so it'll be quickly addressed.
Steve.
So, also in the communication, like, let's say if a Dairy Queen wanted to, and I believe they're public or privately owned here in town, would like 3, not park benches, but picnic tables. They could request those as well.
Wall supplies last.
What happened to, submitting like a lottery, like we discussed last week?
I just didn't follow through with it. I haven't had that many businesses request picnic tables. So that's why I put
Chuck,
a
but
maximum
to
of
Chuck's
4.
point, not all businesses, and it may seem like certain businesses may have been sought out versus all businesses. And then we have limited numbers. We have aldermen that's communicated with specific businesses, and those businesses will get those picnic tables where others may not have known because they don't see the Facebook. They don't. We haven't really publicized this much at all. If they don't watch the meeting, and so last week we discussed a lottery type system, and then this has changed.
So those businesses that I spoke with, I made it very clear that we were going to do some sort of system. They may or may not, there's no guarantee, but I did share what the minimum or maximum may be. That being said, you are correct. We did have that conversation. So not to open up a can of worms that would keep us here much longer, but if you would like to implement that system, we can then amend that vote that we took to allow for that lottery system and for those individuals to reach out to us. But you got to have a deadline, because some businesses aren't going to reach out, and I don't want to sit and hold on to tables when other people are trying to get things set up.
That's what I say. I get the concern, and I know it was talked about, but I don't know that there's time to really, to go through what's already been having, the forms and the fencing and everything else, and then trying to figure out who gets what tables. And I mean, all for whatever you guys want to do, but I think it's going to be pushing it just to get, I don't know. Peggy and then Sam.
And you got to remember, these tables are going to be delivered by the street and alley department, and I think they work till 3 on Friday, and anything past that, we'll be paying overtime. So I agree with you, Steve, what you're trying to say, but we are under limited crunch here. And
I have an 18-foot trailer that I can help facilitate delivering tables, but I was just going on a first come, first served basis.
How many tables do we have?
23.
23.
And that's why I put a maximum of 4. So not one business is going to say, I want 15 of them.
No, but if you had 6 businesses said, I want 4, and they were the first 6 that requested them, and you guys, and the committee, stamps it, okay, good. And then, some other businesses just found out about it because they weren't contacted or whatever. Have you guys at least spoke to 6 businesses?
At least 6.
At least 6. So 6 come up to you, the first 6 that says, I want 4, they're getting the 4.
Yeah, but we do have others. We do have situations where, let's just talk about Spirited, Top Hat, and Gazzardo's. They're all right there together, and Mama's. So in that situation, I think we could persuade those businesses to share tables and not all 4 of them take 4 tables, right? Because they're open at different hours. Like Spirited's open in the evenings, where Mama is open primarily in the mornings, those type of things. I know that they're also setting tables up down the arcade of their own and out on the patio. So they're taking care of some of that themselves. But you're right. Some of these tables, these restaurants, they may take us up on that. So we just don't know. Did we get a confirmation on? Oh, we did. We talked. We were looking into an option for additional tables, but that fell through. There was a cost incurred with those that prevented us from moving forward. So what would you prefer we do about the lottery then?
Say
Go ahead,
Sam,
Sam.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, what if we gave out 18 of the tables, first come, first serve, so to say, and then the last 5 or however many, we would do those by lottery, so that if there was people who were unaware, they would still have a chance to get a table, possibly.
We've been talking about this for a week now. We could set up a lottery, and they have to have their request in by 8 o'clock Thursday morning. I bet I only get 6 requests. I understand that, but I mean, we could do that.
My,
But
my thought was more like, businesses that don't know about it see that it happens on Friday, that the city gave out picnic tables on Friday, and then they're like, oh, Saturday, I would like to have some city picnic tables too. And we gave out 23 already, to six businesses. And the other one's like, oh yeah, we could really have used those too. When we had talked originally last week, when we were talking about maybe a lottery system or whatever, I guess I'm for maybe 2 per business, and then after, let's say, a few days after things open up, let's say the next Tuesday of businesses opening up, if they're not been all used by then, give them all out. I can see that happening. Can you see that happening?
Okay, so the way that these guidelines that we approved this evening says a maximum of 4 picnic tables are allowed per establishment while tables are available. If you would like to start out with 2, I think we could still, without doing a rescinding of the motion and the vote, give each establishment 2, and then give them a maximum of 4 later if tables are available Saturday, Sunday, or whatever.
Ron.
Unless you want to go the long way.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, no system is perfect. I mean, we set a maximum of 4, but that doesn't mean we have to give 4. And I suppose we can give 2, and then we say, hey, I want 2 more. Well, we'll come back to you. If we see we have tables left over, we'll come back to you. We'll give the 2 more that you want. I think it can still work out. And I appreciate your concern. I really do, because I think we all want to help out businesses and all help out these businesses that are struggling. But I think it can still work the way we've designed it. And if a business gets 4 and they realize they don't need all 4, I think they also realize we're all in this together. Hey, do you realize this business needs 2 more? We're not using 2. Go ahead and take them. I think it'll work out the way we already have it.
And it was also pointed out that, some of these places are going to have pretty minimal amounts of seating. Those picnic tables are big. They're going to use their own tables and chairs, and they're going to get as much in there as they possibly can. So I don't think anyone's going to want, 4, because that's going to fulfill all of their space. So, I think that you're going to be limited in that anyway. But, Kevin?
So going back on my scribbling photos, for anybody's watching, I'm actually doing research on my phone. Tracy and Seth got this email. Just by scribbling down, I came up with 25 eating establishments in the town and 7 bars. Remember that text message? So 25 eating establishment, that did include all corporate restaurants, Culver's, Hardee's, McDonald's, all of them, and 7 bars. So, if we do 1 per business, somebody's not going to get tables. So, I was just going on a first come, first serve. We've been media posting this to death. I'll do whatever you want, Steve, but I'm just trying to facilitate this as quick as possible.
Hey, Kevin, I was just curious because the last meeting we had, that was the direction that we were going, and then someone changed.
Because I could not establish any communication with several businesses. None. And I didn't feel right that we've put their name in the lottery if they don't even bother returning a phone call. I mean, I've asked for managers. I've asked for, is the owner available? I've reached out to coworkers to try to get to the manager, and just not getting anywhere. And at one point, I just gave up. Okay, they don't want to respond. I'll move on to the next business and see if I can help them.
Well, just to keep this moving, and as I think was brought to light, not all businesses were phoned or reached. But the way it's written, as Ron said, maximum up to 4. You don't have to give out the 4. Let's just see where things are at. You know, go through the day, Thursday, Friday, find out Thursday, I guess, find out how many needs them, how needs how many, and see where we're at the end of the day. Thursday, hey, we got more, perhaps give me another one, and then maybe to next week, find out how many is still left, and then give the rest of them out.
So does this form that's going out have a spot on there for them to fill out how many things of fencing they want and how many tables they're requesting,
We'll
or how are
chart
you
that.
wanting to? Okay,
Yeah.
so they're just going to contact you directly.
Yep.
Okay.
So what I would recommend then is we will start them out with 2 tables apiece, and then see if there's any interest that approaches us over the weekend. And I'm keeping in mind the fact that Walt's crew has to do this, and to avoid weekend overtime, we'll give starting out 2 each, and then come Monday, if nobody has come forward, then we will distribute the remaining tables to those interested establishments and businesses.
Sounds good.
Beth.
Yes, I mean, there's all different jurisdictions across the state that these individuals have to follow. I think with this letter you're sending out, that we did it, speaking from a liquor standpoint, that I think we need to send the same kind of letter, along with all of what you've got on here, to every single food establishment as well as liquor establishment, so they all know at the same time up front what's coming, because so many things are going around, and some, like you said, don't use Facebook. Some are on that, some aren't. Some see the media, some don't get the courier. I think a letter directly to those establishments that we know.
But they wouldn't actually get it in the mail until probably next week.
Right, but if we got it out, you know.
That's what I say. I don't know how we would.
Well,
Whoever we've got our food license.
Right.
I'll help drop them off.
This is not an uncommon problem we have in trying to get the word out to everybody. We have that with every single thing we do up here. And that's why we do it to the digital media, to Facebook, to the website, to the courier, which is paper media, and by paper mail, because we have people in every one of those categories that use those methods to communicate.
Kevin, you got a list of basically all the people. Can't we just disperse it? Everyone take so many and make sure you physically hand a letter to them on top of dispersing it to the media and putting it on social media. That way everybody has one. I mean, if you just wanted to send out an email and just give a designated amount.
We can put it in a city envelope and drive it to each facility and give it to the person
I was
at the
gonna
counter.
say, whatever we have to do, we can.
We've done it.
That's why I say just put everybody on it. Let's get them out. No issues.
I mean,
Motion to adjourn.
Is there?
second.
We had a motion to remove item C.
Oh.
And we had a second, I believe. It was. Who was the first?
Kevin and Jeff.
Kevin made the motion. Jeff second. Is there any further discussion on this topic? Roll call, please.
Mr. Honeke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Anyone still on the phone that would like to comment? Is there any further discussion amongst the council? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry, Ron.
I would just like to say again, thank you for all of you who worked hard on this and put a lot of hours and a lot of thought into it. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
Second, ditto.
All in favor? I'm sorry. Ron made the motion. Steve seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 8:02 p.m.